Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing another book haul. This will probably be the last book haul of the year and I am kind of assuming that you're going to see it before the start of the new year, though I'm not 100% certain on my posting schedule for the month of December and beginning of January. Today I've got a 50-50 split for you of fiction and non-fiction with a total of about 33 or 34 books to talk about today. So I'm going to start with the fiction, I'm going to run through all of those and then I'll move on to the non-fiction, and if I remember in posting I will include a timestamp in the description below if you do want to jump to the non-fiction if you're not interested in the fiction options. These books were bought on a mixture of some audiobooks and ebooks which I will be including in here, and then also a fairly big order through World of Books, and then a couple of bookstores I physically went to, including my favourite one, Topping & Co in Ely. So that's kind of where I got a lot of these from. A fair number of them are definitely used second-hand books which I got for quite cheap. The first book that I have to talk about is China Dream by Ma Jian. This is described as the kind of Chinese response to 1984. It is a fantastic example of Chinese literature, and it is blending fact with fiction and unflinching satire of totalitarianism, and it's about a gentleman who was charged with making microchips that the Chinese government were going to implant in people's brains to then be able to control them a lot more, but just as he's reaching the point where his work is almost complete, he kind of has a mental breakdown about it and starts to doubt his entire existence. This is a translated fiction, and as I've mentioned in a few videos by now, I am going to be trying to focus more of my reading on translated fiction in 2020, so there are a few that pop up on this list. Another one that is in that kind of vein is the Nakano Thrift Shop by Hiromi Kawakami. This is quite a popular book on BookTube for translated fiction. I think I first heard Harriet Rosie talking about it, but it has popped up on quite a few like translated fiction recommendation videos I've been watching recently. It is about a like bric-a-brac thrift shop that has all these different customers that come through, and it's about the items that they buy and kind of their lives. It's supposed to be really lovely and kind of quietly disarming and really pleasant to read, so I am looking forward to it. This particular one was translated by Elison Powell. Going on a slightly different slant, I also have Ophelia by Lisa Klein. This is a YA and it is a retelling of Hamlet, but this time where Ophelia does not die and instead runs away, I think with a child potentially. So I am very excited about this. I love the play Hamlet, and I really think that the character of Ophelia is fairly underutilized in most plays of like most productions of Hamlet, so I think this is going to be really good fun to read. One that I've actually read already, I think it's the only one that I've read already in this entire list, don't quote me on that, I could be wrong, is Hold Back the Stars by Katie Khan. This is kind of like strange sci-fi, slightly utopian fiction, has a really cool multiverse timeline thing that happens at the end. Again, if I remember, I'll link my video about multiverse timeline books where I talk about this book in more detail. It's really good fun. I listened to it on audiobook and I was in the works buying, like, they do like 3 for a £5, and this was one of them, and I was like, oh yeah, I really want a physical copy of that on my shelves, so I've grabbed this, but I have read it already. One that I grabbed that I'm not 100% certain if I picked the right one or not is Final Girls by Riley Sager. Looking back on my Goodreads, I think there are actually a couple of books that are working on this kind of premise. The final girl is supposed to be the last girl in the classic tropey horror movie who survives the serial killer to come back for the sequel, and the idea is that this is, so the media calls them the Final Girls, the infamous group of survivors that no one wants to be part of. First there were 3 of them, and then 2, and now there can only be 1, and it's about her struggle to survive the second round almost of what's happening. It's the kind of thing that I've seen, that sort of trope and that idea of like somebody coming for a final girl again, appearing in quite a lot of crime fiction recently, and there was one called The Last Final Girl, I think, which was the one that I was actually intending on buying, but I got slightly confused in the works and grabbed this one instead. I think, you know, it's a standard trope that I'm not mad that I've grabbed the wrong one. I think it's still going to be really interesting and good fun, but I have no idea when I'm going to get around to it. It's a bit of a trashy thriller flick that is not something I tend to read too much of, but it's nice to have 1 or 2 on my shelves when I am in that mood. Okay, I have another book from Matt Haig. He's one of my favourite authors and I'm trying to get through his backlist, and one of them is The Dead Fathers Club. This is one of his earlier works. Like I said, it's very backlist, and this is a retelling of Hamlet, but with like a very modern twist on it. You might notice there's now 2 retellings of Hamlet in this particular video. There might be something in the works planned for a video idea in 2020, which is why I'm starting to grab those kind of books for it now, but I don't know when I'm actually going to get to this. Another translated fiction is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This was in a video recommended by, I'm pretty sure, Jen Campbell, and the idea is that this is a coffee shop where you have the opportunity to go back to a moment in time for the length of the time it takes for your coffee to get cold, to be able to either speak to somebody or try and create some kind of change or something like that. And it's about the various characters who come to this coffee shop and then use this to go back and kind of confront something in their past. It looks really, really cute. Apparently it's a Japanese bestseller. I'm trying to find for you who translated it. It was translated by Jeffrey Truslow, I think. But yeah, so this one looks good and is highly recommended. Another YA on my list, I've got a couple more YA, more than I would like normally buy. This is Pulp by Robin Talley, who apparently is an award-winning author. I'm sure if you're more in the YA like contemporary romance circuit, her name might mean a bit more than it does to me. But this one is about two characters kind of across two different time periods. One of them is in 1955, Janet Jones must keep the love she shares for her best friend a secret, and then 62 years later, Abby Zimet is doing a senior project on classic 1950s lesbian pulp fiction and feels connected to one particular author. And the idea is it's so like I say, it's a female gay romance, and it just looked quite fun. I really like pulp fiction, as in the, not the movie, the product Pulp Fiction, the kind of time wave. I used to collect them, so this sounds like it's going to be really good fun and a bit of a giggle. And again, I really don't have much contemporary on my shelves at the moment, so I'd like to add in a few more for when I am in that mood. One that is very much done the rounds in like literary fiction booktube world is English Animals by Laura Kaye. This is about a woman who gets invited to live with a couple, and she was under the belief that she would be helping them with their business, and then she ends up helping them in their taxidermy business in particular, and then it's something to do with a bit of a love triangle between them, a bit of a kind of family drama as such, as far as I'm aware, but don't quote me on that. The thing that I'm really interested in this for is the information about the taxidermy. Taxidermy is something that I'm really interested in. I'm actually wearing a little tiny moth in a test tube today, which is one of my favourite necklaces. I really like creepy dead things basically, so I'm really interested to see how this plays out in a fiction book and to learn more about the art of taxidermy. Another one that I picked up from the works, which was a bit of a spur at the moment, not 100% certain when I'm going to get round to it, and it's called Light Years by Cass Morgan, who apparently is from the best-selling author of The 100, which is a TV show on Amazon Prime, which I did really enjoy. I think I enjoyed the first 2 seasons more than anything else. It kind of goes off the deep end a little bit, but I did really enjoy that. This is a sci-fi, and it's something to do with an exclusive fleet academy finally admitting students from every planet in the solar system, and it's a collection of different characters from different planets coming together in the school and having various interactions. I'm kind of getting slightly A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet vibes from it. I liked The 100. I figure it could be a giggle, and again, I don't have many like big space opera-y kind of things on my shelves at the moment, so I wanted to kind of fill that niche gap just in case I'm in the mood to read them. Okay, the last like physical fiction book that I have before we talk about audiobooks and ebooks was the last pre-order of the year. You'll have seen it on everybody's hauls and probably reading lists at the moment. It's The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstein, the hotly anticipated next book from the very famous author of The Night Circus. This is one of the most hyped books of the entire year on BookTube. I barely need to go into it, but it's something to do with the Magic Library. It's all I really know about it. It's gorgeous. Look at that down the side. Like, is that not one of the most beautiful things you've seen in a book ever? I've no idea when I'm going to get to it. I'm quite excited about it, but I also want to prioritise certain things on my reading list that have been there for a while, so I don't want to immediately jump to this yet, and I'm actively trying to avoid any information about it from like people's opinions of it. I know it's been well received, but I don't want to know any more than that, and so hopefully I'll get around to it maybe in January, February time. Okay, now we're going to talk audiobooks. So I picked up The Odyssey by Emily Wilson. This is a new translation of The Odyssey, which was originally written by Homer, and the reason why this is such an interesting translation is it's the first time a female academic has translated it, and she puts a very different spin on the translation. I've been meaning to get around to this for a while. I've never really read anything from like classical Greek literature outside of the odd bit for my philosophy degree, like Plato and people like that, and never definitely never any of the like fiction side of things, so I'm really interested in it. I listened to some of the podcasts that the Overdue podcast guys did on this whole book, so that was really interesting as well, so I'd like to get to that one. I then have The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, I think. Sorry, I've got my notes like down here that I'm trying to look at. This one again was like huge on BookTube. It is some kind of epic high fantasy. I don't know a crazy amount more. I'm trying to avoid knowing too much more because again there's a lot of hype around it and I don't want to like ruin it for me by knowing too much more about it. I think it's Asian inspired. I'm not 100% certain, but I'm quite excited to get to it. It's a beefy book though, so I'm not too sure when I'm going to get to that one. I have The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton wrote The House of Mirth, which I read maybe last month or the month before. Really enjoyed that and just wanted to pick it up. It was like a Black Friday deal, so I've grabbed that one ready for when I next want to take on an Edith Wharton. And then the final audiobook I have in fiction is The Turn of Midnight by Minette Walters. This is book 2 in her, I think it's just called the Black Death series. I'm not 100% certain. It's a duology. The first one is called The Last Hours that I read a couple of months ago and absolutely adored. So as soon as my credit came through from Audible, I was like, right, I'm going to pick up the second one. I don't know when I'm going to go for it yet because I'm not quite ready to jump back in with those characters yet. I like to give myself a bit of breathing space, but the audiobook was phenomenal. The accents were so good. So I'm really excited about that at some point. And now we're going to talk about ebooks. So I got a new case for my e-reader, by the way. It's very similar to my old one. It's just I've gone for the black one because this is a clever case. I'll link them down below again if I remember, but they've now added the magnetic feature and also it clips back on itself, which is really helpful for reading. I have Hagseed by Margaret Atwood, which is part of the Hogarth Shakespeare collection, and this is where the Hogarth Publishing Company commissioned various big name authors like Margaret Atwood to redo various Shakespeare plays. This one I believe is The Tempest was what she was given, but don't quote me on that. Again, like I mentioned, sorry, there's a lot of honking going on outside. Like I mentioned, I'm doing like a video mini series to do with Shakespeare in 2020, so I'm starting to grab a few books for that as we go. I also have the book of The Unnamed Midwife by Meg Elison. This one is part of a trilogy as far as I'm aware, and it's a dystopian fiction to do with problems with reproduction, and I think that the general public general population has issues with conceiving, and I believe that this midwife kind of travels from place to place. Again, don't quote me. I was interested in it quite a while ago and I finally picked it up because it was on for quite cheap, but I'm not 100% certain. I know Ink Not Blood read it a while ago and really enjoyed it as well, so I'm quite excited about that. So yeah, so those are all the fiction books that I've bought, and now we're going to move on to non-fiction. A non-fiction that I have here is Bluestockings, the remarkable story of first women to fight for an education by Jane Robinson. I actually vividly remember when I was working at Waterstones when this came out, became really big, so it's been published for like a good solid 7 or 8 years, maybe longer, but the reason why I'm interested in reading this was because the Bluestockings were mentioned in Rainbow Dust, the book about British butterflies that I read last month, because a few of the women who were involved in the Bluestockings were also very keen kind of nature lovers and collected butterflies and did a lot of work in that area for kind of separating out species, and it was some of that love that also inspired them into doing this kind of fight for women's education, and this is a lovely example of where like one non-fiction sparks you to want to read something about the next one, because this woman who was in this book, Mary her name was, but I can't remember her surname because there were so many people in that book. She was such a fascinating character who we got to briefly see in like one chapter, so I'm really excited about reading a whole book about them. Then I have Queen Victoria, Daughter, Wife, Mother, Widow by Lucy Worsley. Lucy Worsley is a very big history writer, and she's been a presenter as well on various history shows. Her most popular one's probably Jane Austen in the Home or something like that, which I was thinking about buying. Turns out I actually have 4 separate Lucy Worsley books on my want to reads list, but this is the one that has captured my attention the most, just because I've been enjoying reading so much Victorian literature at the moment, so I thought it'd be really interesting to read something about the Queen herself in that time period and learn a little bit more about her reign, so that kind of a lot of that Victorian literature that I'm reading has a bit more of a context for me. And like I say, I've been meaning to get around to a Lucy Worsley for ages, so I'm going to start with this one, and if I like her writing style, go out and buy the other 3 that are on my want to reads. I have Feral by George Monbiot. This is about rewilding and the science behind rewilding, and I do have another book on my TBR that I'll mention in a second because it's in audiobook form, that is also about rewilding, and this is where you give a plot of land back to nature and how to reintroduce various wild things, whether it be species of animals or plants, to try and help the ecosystem, and in doing so help our kind of climate and to try and increase like to improve climate change and things like that. It's something I know very little about, but off the back of both the interest I've had in kind of nature writing in general already recently, and also reading Greta Thunberg's short little collection of speeches, this is a topic that I think I'd be really interested in learning more about, so I've picked up a few books on the matter. One that I've been meaning to buy for such a long time is Working Stiff, 2 years and the Making of a Medical Examiner. This is by Judith Melinek and TJ Mitchell, and it's a true story of basically a medical examiner and the various cases that she saw over the years. We all know on this channel I'm a huge fan of medical books, really enjoy them. And I want to do a whole video about some of my favourite books about medicine and like medical history, and the various kind of career paths in it. This one is also on my 5-star predictions list for non-fiction, so of course by owning it I'm actually more likely to get around to it. I was so psyched about this, I might even get to it this month. I was like flicking through it when it turned up, and I've already read like a chapter here or there because it's just so riveting. So I think I do just need to sit down and do this one because I'm so psyched for it. One that has been an absolute nightmare to get a hold of is Waterfalls of Stars by Roseanne Alexander. This is my 10 years on the island of Skoma. This was brought to my attention by Harriet Rosie, and she made it sound so fascinating that I could not wait to get my hands on it, but it's proved really difficult to get a hold of. So I've had to go through like a really obscure secondhand book website to get it, and it cost like 15 quid, which was insane. But yeah, basically this is about the woman Roseanne and her boyfriend when her boyfriend basically gets the job of being the like warden of this island of Skoma, which has got a variety of different animals and wildlife on it, and the idea is that you go out and you live there and you keep an eye on the animals and you kind of tend to the island, and it's about their 10 years of doing it. Again, this is kind of really leaning off the back of that sudden interest in nature writing that I've had, so it's one that I was kind of interested in reading anyway, and then off the back of reading Rainbow Dust I've been like, I just want to read more about nature, like I'm super psyched right now. So this looks like it's going to be amazing. It's also just gorgeous book, so very excited about this. I have 2 books from Mary Roach. So Mary Roach is a science writer. I've read 2 of her books so far this year. I've read Grunt and Stiff. They're both amazing. Some of my favourite science writing I've read, some of my favourite non-fiction I've read, and I did say when I was talking about her last that I was just going to go and buy a bunch of her back catalogue, so that's what I've done. I've got Spook, which is the science behind the afterlife, and I have Packing for Mars, which is the curious science of life in the void or how we would live in space. Both of these look excellent. I have no idea which one I'm going to pick up first, but I really love her writing style, and these were the 2 out of her, like, I think she has like 7 books in total so far, so I've read 2, and these are the next 2 that I'm really interested about, and then there's a couple that at some point I'll get to them, but currently they're not drawing my attention in the same way that these are. Now, I found a really cute little book that was not on my want to read list at all, but I found it whilst looking for a different book, which I did find and I'll mention in a second. But that's Discovering Dorothea, The Life of the Pioneering Fossil Hunter Dorothea Bate. This is by Caroline Schindler. This book has like 10 ratings on Goodreads. It's absolutely like just a complete unknown, but it is about a young girl called Dorothea Bate who ended up becoming like a seriously major fossil hunter and contributed to some of the biggest collections in the world, and it's just about her life and her time collecting fossils. It is well documented on this channel that I adore dinosaurs. There are a couple more dinosaur books coming up for us in my ebook collection. So yeah, as I was looking for this particular one that I was after, this one popped up as an option, and I was like, I think it was like £2. I was like, I have to go for this. I've never heard of Dorothea Bate, so I'm very excited to check it out. Okay, we have now Unbelievable by T. Christian Miller and Ken Armstrong. This is now been made into a Netflix miniseries, and basically is about a particular true crime incident where a young woman was raped and then basically not believed, and she broke down and like claimed that she was making a false report, but then across a bunch of different states the same thing was happening, and it's the story of a detective who was like, no, I think there is something more to this and I'm going to investigate it. This actually won the Pulitzer Prize a few years ago. I'm really interested in reading it. I think it's going to be the kind of thing that's going to be heartbreaking and harrowing, and I've actively not watched the Netflix miniseries, even though I imagine it and I've heard it's amazing, because like I just can't handle that, like that just is not what I sit down and do TV for, so that's not my cup of tea. But in book form, I'm far more likely to actually get round to reading it, and it's such an important topic that it's important to read about these things in a way that guards your own mental health about it. Okay, last physical book, and then we do have again a few audio and ebooks, and this one I bought when I was up in York visiting my sister, and that is Viking Britain, A History by Thomas Williams. York is a really big epicenter for Viking history in the UK, and it's something that I know very, very little about. So when I was at the Jorvik Centre with my partner looking around, I decided to pick this up from their gift shop because it's something that I have a huge gap in my knowledge about, and I'm really enjoying reading a lot more history at the moment, so I thought this would be really interesting. I've not researched in particular whether this is a very good example of a Viking book or not. It was one of the ones that they had there. It's the one that looked the most interesting, so at some point I will get around to it. I don't really know when though. And now we have a few audiobooks and a few ebooks to talk about. So the only audiobook that I actually bought that's non-fiction is Wilding by Isabel Tree, and this is, like I said, about the book Feral. This is about the act of rewilding, but as far as I'm aware, this is based off of her blog that she wrote about the process of rewilding. She her and her husband inherited a farm, as far as I'm aware, and then they decided to give a bunch of it back to nature to try and reintroduce a bunch of species onto their land. So I'm hoping if I read the two in quite like close succession, I'm going to get the personal experience of what it's like to rewild something, and then from her, and then from Feral I'll get more of the like scientific process kind of on a bigger, more macro scale, so it should be really interesting. Wilding is doing very, very well this year. It's been kind of heavily commended and is being recommended around on a lot of different platforms for Christmas. I've seen it mentioned far more than Feral, so I'm really, really excited to get to it. The other dinosaur book that I was on about is The Fossil Hunter by Shelley Elamino. This is Dinosaurs, Evolution and the Woman Whose Discoveries Changed the World. I'm pretty sure the woman in question, her name is Mary Anning, I think, as far as I'm aware. And again, similar to the Dorothea case, she was just a woman who was really interested in fossils. She lived down on the coast and she collected a whole bunch of things, but in doing so discovered some of the, like, she should be credited with some of the original discoveries of various dinosaur species that we now know today. Because I've read so much about dinosaurs in so many different areas, the names I get really mixed up now with who did what. I know I've read a bit about her before, so I'm really excited about reading a whole book about her. Then we have Sex with Kings by Eleanor Herman, and this is about the various wives, courtesans, mistresses, bedfellows of the various kings out there and the impacts that they have had on the king's reigns throughout history. I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm pretty sure it spans about 500 years worth of history, and it's going to be such an interesting look at the power dynamics and how much of what has happened in history has actually been orchestrated by women behind the scenes. It's also going to be such a really good snapshot look of, I'm pretty sure it's mainly European history, maybe even just British, but I'm not completely sure about that. But I think it's going to be just really, really interesting. I have Lab Girl, which is a story of trees, science and love by Hope Jian. I think this is one that Olive really liked. It is about a woman who is a scientist and studies, I think she's a botanist and she studies trees, but it's a combination of like a memoir from her and like almost like a love letter to her studies and trees in general. And again, like I said, nature writing, I'm feeling it at the moment. I'm buying a ton, I'm reading a ton, I'm psyched about it all. So yeah, that one looked really, really cool and interesting. I've heard many people talk positively about Lab Girl in the past. One that I'm reading at the moment that I did mention in my December TBR is The Squared Circle, which is by David Shoemaker, and it is about the history of wrestling. I'm about 10% of the way through so far and absolutely loving it. It's so cool, so interesting. It's gone all the way back to talking about like the early 1900s and how wrestling first formed, its connection with boxing. It's just generally, it's going amazingly and I'm super, super psyched about it. So thank you already to Amy for recommending this one to read as our buddy read. Super psyched, and we'll definitely talk more about it in my December wrap up. Then we have The Food Explorer. In fact, I think this might be the last one I'm talking about. Yes, the last book I have is The Food Explorer, which is the true adventures of a globe-trotting botanist who transformed what America eats. And this is by Daniel Stone. I'm not 100% certain exactly what this is about, beyond obviously somebody who explored a lot and ate a lot of food and then brought it back to America. I don't know who that person is, whether it is Daniel Stone or somebody else that he's writing about. All I know is I really quite like food writing. I like food in general. I like learning about where it came from, and this has been on my list for absolutely ages. So I figured, why not pick it up for cheap on an ebook and just give it a go, basically. So yeah, that is, I think, finally it for this haul. Quite a large haul for the end of the year, but like I said, most of these were from World of Books. They were all about £2 or £3 each, so I just really wanted to go through. I was clearing out my want to read list anyway, getting rid of a lot of books off of it that I'm no longer interested in reading, and then once I kind of whittled it down a lot, I was like, right, now I'm gonna buy a good solid like 10 or 15 books from this list, just so that I'm kind of ticking them off and I actually have them on my shelves. Because as much as I love going to bookshops and finding books that I didn't know I wanted to read and kind of exploring the shelves and picking them up and being able to flick through them a lot more, I do also have like a solid nearly 200 books on my want to read Goodreads list that I am interested in reading, that sometimes if I'm not careful I won't ever pick up because I don't ever actually buy them or get them from the library, or like get them in any meaningful way to be able to read them. So it's important to me to keep rotating through that as much as I can. So yeah, so do let me know, have you read any of these? What are you excited about? You know, what do you think I should start with first? Or any of them you're like, oh, that sounds rubbish? Do let me know, that's always fun. If you like my stuff, do feel free to subscribe. I always forget to say that at the end, but hey, subscribe, come hang out, watch some more stuff. Have a wonderful reading week. I'll chat to you soon. Bye.